Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Nothing in My Brain, where we discuss psychology and neuroscience topics.
I'm Olivia,
I'm Joey.
and in this week's episode, we're really honored to welcome Dr. Williams, who is a board-certified music therapist and also an assistant professor of music therapy at Belmont University. Great.
Okay.
So thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview today, and we really appreciate having you on our podcast.
You're so welcome. Happy to be here.
Okay, so just getting started, could you talk a little bit about your background and what inspired you to go into the field of musical therapy?
Sure. I grew up in a very musical family. I played piano and violin, and all of my parents played music. And so I loved music, but I didn't really see myself becoming a performer. What I really liked was the sciences, and I liked psychology, and I liked research. And so when I heard that there was a field that combines these two things, music and science, right? Music and kind of helping profession, um, it just felt like that would be the right thing for me. And so I did my Bachelor of Music Therapy, and then I worked for a while as a clinician. So I worked for a private practice, um, working with a lot of children with autism, but also other folks as well. And then I knew that ultimately I really wanted to teach and become a professor. So then I went to grad school, did master's and PhD all in music therapy, and now I get to teach it.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Yeah. Okay, so for our second question, since a lot of people are unfamiliar with the field, could you maybe explain really quick about what music therapy is and what a music therapist's role could be?
Yeah, great question. So at its very kind of core level, music therapy is the use of music for some sort of non-musical goal that relates to health and healing. Um, And so music therapists learn how music kind of affects humans in different ways, how it affects our emotions, how it affects our movement, how it affects our language, our thinking, and all of these different things. And then we can work in different settings, for example, hospitals or um, assisted living facilities for older adults or schools for children, or sometimes, in private practice with kind of clients who come for therapy. And we can work on all of these different goal areas. So, um, a classic example that I like to give from my own practice is in our brains, there's lots of overlap between music and speech. And so sometimes with children on the autism spectrum, if you sing with them, they can start to develop the ability to speak more quickly than without. So things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So I noticed that you talked about like working with kids with autism. So is there any other conditions or challenges that you commonly work with in music therapy?
hmm Like which kind of population? So
Yeah.
autism and then other ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so autism is a common one. Also, older adults with dementia is a common one. Parkinson's disease, music therapy can help a lot with walking, particularly. There's a My particular specialty is called neurologic music therapy, so we do a lot of rehabilitation work. So if people have had a stroke or a brain injury, um, we can do a lot of work with them as well as other things. Mental health is another big area. So it kind of goes on. I could list all different populations, but many people can benefit.
Thank you
yeah,
for that.
that sounds really interesting. And since I know you've researched a lot about like music therapy, could you maybe explain how music affects the brain on a neurological level?
hmm it's a big question because music affects the brain in so many ways. So maybe I'll give a couple examples.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the ways that we can think about, um, maybe some people have had this experience where there's something difficult that's been happening in life, and you don't quite have the words to talk about it yet. It's hard to think of, it's hard to even know what am I feeling? What is it? What am I feeling right now? But then sometimes we hear a song that just matches our mood, and then we just maybe we've been to cry, but we all of a sudden realize, this is why I've been feeling sad and I didn't realize, or I've been feeling, something like that. And in our brain, what's happening is that these higher cognitive areas, the prefrontal cortex, these are some of the areas that we use to kind of think and process and intellectually analyze. Um, but sometimes those areas aren't necessarily always so good at understanding emotions. But music can kind of go past those areas and touch directly into our limbic system, which is where emotions are processed. And so it's like a more direct route to processing emotion. So that's one example. Another example is that as humans, whenever we hear a beat, like it can be as simple as a metronome beat or within a song, like a song that has a really good beat, in our brains, the motor areas of our brain begin to fire neurons in time with the beat, preparing our body to move to the beat. Um, and so, like in some languages, there's not a different word for music and dance because actually in our brains, these two things are very much connected. Um, and there's similar ways that music touches directly onto areas related to speech, as I mentioned earlier, and
Mhm.
language processing, as well as just attention and executive functioning and things like this. So music basically goes everywhere in our brain. There's not a specific spot that's the music part. It's just all different areas connect with music in different ways.
Yeah, music is definitely very impactful.
Hmm.
So moving on. So we want to know like what does like music therapy look like for you currently? Like what are your roles and responsibilities?
Hmm. So for me, my main job is teaching music therapy. So I teach at Belmont University in Nashville, and so we have undergraduate students who are learning to become music therapists. So most of my time is spent in the classroom, or teaching some of the musical skills needed for music therapy. But then clinically, I also bring students out into a couple of community sites. So I have an older adult who has dementia that we do music therapy with him. And then we also do music therapy. It's a music and movement group for it's an adult day program. So it's a mixture of older adults, some of whom have dementia, and also some younger adults who have intellectual disabilities. And they come here during the day and they have different programming. So we come once a week, myself and some students, and we provide a music and movement group for them. So those are the main things right now.
So, as kind of like, as you said, you do like a lot of music intervention. Can you
Hmm.
maybe elaborate on like some specific techniques or strategies you use?
Sure. Um, so within the goal, so we think about these goal domains of movement, um, speech and language, cognition, so thinking, attention, memory, executive functioning, things like that, and emotions. If we think of those five, is there one that you're most curious about? And I can tell you about an intervention from.
I think I'm really curious about like the speech part and the
Okay.
emotions.
And what was the second one?
Motion.
Emotions. Okay. So, um, one example for speech, there's a technique called melodic intonation therapy, and
Okay.
basically when somebody has had a stroke or a brain injury that affects their left inferior frontal gyrus, which is a part of the brain where expressive speech is housed, it's also called Broca's area. When that area is damaged, the person might know what they want to say. They have all the thoughts, they have all the things, but their body is not able to connect that thought to the actual movement of the mouth. So they're unable to say all of the things that they're thinking, which, as you can imagine, can be very frustrating. Um, so what music therapy can do is we train the person to sing functional sentences like basic things that they might need around the house, or saying, I need to go to the bathroom, or I'm hungry, or I love you, or whatever it is, some sentences. And we put those to melodies that match the cadence of the speech. So um, if it's I'm hungry, then you want the melody to go da la da, right? Something like that, and then turn it into an actual melody. Um, and in repeating that melody, we're actually using part of the brain on the other side, the right inferior frontal gyrus, which is related to singing. And we can retrain the brain to sing instead of speak. And then over time, the person can start to communicate again through singing and make it sound like they're talking just by using a different brain area.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that association is really cool.
yeah, that's really cool. So that's one example.
Mhm.
Okay. Also, like another question I had was like, is there a certain genre of music maybe that's more beneficial to our mental health?
Hmm. Um, it's a bit of a there's kind of two answers. So the first answer is the music that you really like is going to be the most beneficial to your mental health. There's
Mhm.
not like, a lot of people wonder, is classical music the best? It's only the best if you really like classical music. If you don't like classical music, it's not going to help you necessarily. So that's a big part of it. But the other thing is, there are some, songs that have really maybe negative, depressing language or something like that. And maybe at first, somebody who's having a mental health crisis or is really anxious or experiencing depression or something like that might listen to that song and at first feel like, oh, like this person gets me and they understand me. And that's good. But you don't want to stay there because if you stay listening to songs, then you start to feel like that's all there is. And so sometimes we make playlists with people where we help them find like what are your sad songs, the songs that just do make you feel sad and allow yourself to cry if you need to. And then what are your happy songs and how can we build a playlist that moves you slowly from one state to another? Um, so that's the complicated part of it.
That's interesting. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, yeah. So I just kind of had a question as like your role as a private musical therapist. Have you ever encountered any maybe emotional or difficult situations, and how did you kind of work around that?
Yeah. I think that as music therapists, we encounter difficult situations all the time because our clients are coming to us with their struggles and their difficulties. And so I've had situations where clients struggle with personal distance and boundaries, and maybe they come too close or they're sort of grabbing your arm or maybe a child throwing a drum mallet or things like that. Those are all things that can happen. And so part of it is being really understanding that oftentimes people who have difficult behaviors, they don't want to have those behaviors, but there's something happening in their brain that um, makes it difficult for them to inhibit these things that they know they shouldn't do, right? And then the other piece of it is to actually help and have really good boundaries and good structures and safety and training so that we can navigate those challenging situations. And so there's some trainings that I've done in things like nonviolent crisis intervention. It's called how to, stay safe as yourself while not injuring anyone else and things like that. But generally there's simple things like having enough space between you and another person if you know they get overwhelmed, um, making sure that you give people breaks if they need them. And if the person, if it's a child who benefits from having their parent nearby, having the parent maybe in the room with them or close by if they need to take a break with their mom or something like that. So just trying to figure out what is it that this person needs in order to feel calm, safe, and regulated, so that they can participate in the session to the best of their ability.
Yeah, that was really well said.
Thank you. So another question we had was, so what led you to be a professor at Belmont and teach about music therapy?
Hmm. Um, Yeah, well, I knew that I always wanted to teach, but so I'm from Canada,
Oh,
and in Canada we only have five, maybe now six, anyways, not very many universities
mhm.
that have music therapy degree programs. But in the United States there are 90, so many, many more. And so when I started looking for jobs, Belmont University had a job opening, and I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't fully ready to start working yet, or I didn't think I was. I kind of applied just to see what would happen, applied for fun, and then they ended up offering me the job, and then I had to go and Google where is Nashville because I didn't really know US geography super well, but
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of worked out, and it's been a really good fit, and I really enjoy teaching there. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
So, what do you kind of enjoy the most about teaching music therapy?
Yeah. Um, I love that question. I think I enjoy seeing my students get excited when they learn about music therapy stuff. So learning about when they realize, oh, this is something that music can do. This is how music affects our brain. This is a technique that I could use. When they start recognizing that the music therapy they're doing in their practicum sites, like I mentioned, those two sites that I supervise, when
Yeah.
they see the effects on clients and realize that they actually have the capacity to really help people through music, when I see their joy, I feel joyful. So I think just getting to see that learning process is just really brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's really sweet. So, since you are a board certified therapist, what was kind of the process to becoming one, and what career pathways are there for anyone who's interested in pursuing this field?
Yeah, great question. So to become a board certified music therapist, you have to do, usually it's an undergraduate degree in music therapy plus an internship. Sometimes people can do an undergraduate degree in something else, maybe music and psychology, and then they do a master's of music therapy. But either way, you have to do some sort of education and degrees in music therapy, and then you do an internship, which is around 6 months working, under supervision of experienced music therapists. And then you have to pass a board exam. And once you've passed that exam, then you are board certified and you have to maintain that credential by doing continuing education throughout your career. And yeah, in terms of career paths, the most obvious one is to, get a music therapist therapy degree and become a music therapist, go work in a hospital, work in a facility, and that's what a lot of people do. But there are other paths as well. A music therapy degree can lead to some of our students might do a master's in occupational therapy or speech language pathology, sometimes physical therapy, or mental health counseling, things like that. Those are possible pathways for further education. And then either sometimes people just do the speech therapy full time, or they can do some sort of combination now of these two fields. Um, so there's a lot of different options for this for career pathways for this degree. It's not just music therapy.
Oh, yeah, I think specializing is really cool. So, how many
Yeah.
years of schooling does it usually take to kind of?
So yeah, if you do an undergrad, it would be 4 years plus a 6 month internship. So kind of 4.5 years.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
nice.
Yeah.
So for the people who are are interested in pursuing this field, what do you think is the most rewarding aspect of it?
Yeah, there was a study, someone did a study recently, and I'm going to forget exactly where this came out, but it was published on the news. I think CNBC did a paper how an article that of all of the careers that are the most rewarding, music therapy is like
Mhm.
number one.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, which is kind of cool. But I think yeah, it's rewarding. The process is really enjoyable. Like music therapy is fun. It's really enjoyable. It's enjoyable for us. It's enjoyable for our clients. And then, so I think just that process is rewarding in itself. And then seeing how it really can affect people's everyday lives and functioning and ability to be who they want to be in the world. That's just really rewarding to see the real impact it has on people's lives.
Yeah, that was really well said. So, kind of on the flip side, what were some of the biggest challenges for you in pursuing this field?
hmm I think one of the challenges of this particular career is that it combines a lot of different areas of expertise. You have to be a really good musician to be a music therapist. You have to play piano and guitar, and you have to be able to sing. Um, you also have to have a good understanding of human development and psychology. You have to be able to understand multiple domains, speech and language, motor skills, emotions, all of these different things. You have to know your own the music therapy clinical process, how to assess, how to develop a treatment plan, developing goals and objectives. Um, there's so many things that you have to feel competent in and be practiced in. Um, and then it's also a newer field, and so not everyone knows what music therapy is. Um, which is why people like you, like you're doing an interview to learn more about this and share about this, which I think is so wonderful. But a big part of our job often ends up advocating for our field and trying to explain to people what music therapy is and why it's important. And so I think that is a challenge is that yeah, as a music therapist, there's just a lot of things that you have to be able to do all the time. So it can be a lot.
Yeah, this is really interesting to us because we also both play instruments
Yeah.
as well. So,
Oh, nice. What do you guys play?
um,
So I play the piano and the double bass in an orchestra.
and then I
Oh,
play
wow,
piano
cool.
and violin.
Piano and violin, very nice. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, piano and violin were my instruments growing up too. But double
Oh,
bass is so cool. So you both have piano and a string instrument.
yeah.
Very cool.
Um, so, so we wanted to ask, like, how do you balance teaching, research, and other responsibilities since you're doing so much in this field?
Hmm. By the way, you guys have really great questions. Good job
Oh,
coming
thank
up with
you.
these questions. Yeah, so the way it works, so Belmont, the university I work at, is primarily a teaching institution. And so I what I'm paid to do is pretty much 100% of the time is teach. But I am expected to do a little bit of research. And so um, I have found, and that's not every institution is like that. Some universities, you might do 60% teaching and 40% research or some combination like that. So Belmont's teaching. So mostly what I do is teach, but I do love to do research as well. And so I try to engage in collaborative projects. So I have a research project that I'm going to be starting out with one of my colleagues in Indonesia starting in May. And I have some colleagues from Canada that we're working on a paper with. And so trying to, yeah, doing research, but not just doing it all by myself, having people that I work on projects with. That's what helps. And then yeah, and then the clinical piece, I've done a little bit where I have music therapy clients on the side, sometimes in the summers and things like that. But a lot of my clinical work is through the supervision I do with students. So yeah, so it's a lot of different things, but it's also what makes it enjoyable that there's a variety. Um,
Yeah, your research sounds really intriguing. So, could you elaborate on kind of what your current projects are?
sure, yeah. So the project with my colleague in Indonesia, her name is Kezia Putri, and she actually studied in Canada, and we met at a conference in Canada, which is how I know her. But um, her university is a similar university to Belmont in terms of they both have like a Christian focus, and they both have music therapy program, things like that. And so we're going to do a curriculum comparison and look at how has the curriculum, which was both initially taken from the American Music Therapy Association, so the um, her university, Universitat Pelita Harapan, they took um, the AMTA, American Music Therapy Association curriculum. And then over the last 10 years, they've been developing it and evolving it so that it makes sense for her context. And then at Belmont, we have the AMTA curriculum, which has also developed in the last 10 years. So we're just going to compare, looking at, okay, two institutions that are very similar in many ways, but in different countries, and how does the curriculum evolved over time? So it's like a cross-cultural study.
Ooh.
And the one that I have with my colleagues in Canada is kind of a continuation of some research I did um, in my PhD, but it's looking at what is the effect of music and sound on the sensory integration and sensory uh, challenges that individuals on the autism spectrum have. And so just looking at what is actually out there in the research. So we're writing a review article on that. So that's my main projects, yeah.
Oh yeah, that definitely sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So what I know you've mentioned multiple times that you've kind of focused on autism spectrum
Mhm.
disorder. So what kind of led you to focus on that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, my PhD research was very much focused really around autism. When I was working as a clinician before grad school, I worked with a lot of kiddos, children on the autism spectrum, and sometimes with their families as well.
Oh,
And when I was doing that work, I noticed that music therapy was helping. It was helping with their speech and language. It was helping with their social skills. It was helping with their kind of physical regulation. But when I tried to go and research more and read more articles about, how exactly is this working? I wanted to understand why does this work? How does this work? How can I make it work better? I realized that there actually wasn't enough research on it. I couldn't get all my questions answered. So that made me want to myself go and do some of the research to answer some of the questions that I had. So that's kind of what led me into choosing that field was the families, the clients that I worked with.
Yeah.
So since you've been in this field for some time, how do you think has the field of music therapy evolved, and where do you see the future of music therapy going?
Yeah. Well, music therapy is not super old. It emerged as like it's its own field after World War II and really has only grown in kind of grown a lot in the 60s, 70s, 80s and until now. Um, I think as people learn where music can be helpful, so if we look at these different domains of mental health and um, movement, cognition, all of these things, we see research done in specific areas. For example, the area that I special in neurologic music therapy, is almost becoming its own kind of whole area of practice. And we see other research happening, areas around really around mental health, digging into that and different things like that. So I think that over time, I have a feeling that the field will become more specialized. And I also hope that it will become more like music. We consider music therapy to be an evidence-based profession. We're trying to do interventions based on the research evidence that's out there. But the reality is that there's a lot of room for research, just as really in any medical field, but definitely in music therapy, there's a lot of room for research to really understand how music can affect us. So I think that hopefully music therapy grows in its understanding of how it works and what we can do and what its potential is, things like that.
Yeah, definitely it's gonna keep growing and expanding.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to ask, have there been any moments in your role as like a musical therapist that have deeply impacted you?
Hmm. I think yeah, I mean there's big moments, certainly when I saw how music therapy had really huge effects in someone's life. I think I mentioned talking about autism and speech.
Yeah.
That this was there was a big moment when I first practiced with this little 5-year-old. He didn't have any words, but he could kind of say the alphabet sounds like but he couldn't turn it into words. But through music therapy, through trying to sing together and things like that, he learned to speak to a point where his mom was like, "Well, he's turns out he's a really talkative kid. Like he won't stop talking." Um, so that really amazed me because I was like, whoa, this like it works. It actually works. But I think that, not every day is so dramatic like that. Not every client has such dramatic changes. So I think it's a lot of the little moments where you realize um, that this is really meaningful for someone, or their life has gotten a little bit better because of something that you did. These little changes, and seeing many little improvements. I think those are really motivating and meaningful because that's also human change. We don't always change really quickly. When we grow and when we improve, when we heal, that's often a very slow process. So getting to see those little moments is really powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that was well
definitely very
said. Yeah.
gratifying.
So as one of like our last questions, so what advice would you give to someone considering a career in music therapy?
Yeah. I think if um, somebody is interested in the field, there's a few things you can do. One is work on yourself as a musician, play guitar, play piano, sing, get comfortable playing with other people, playing in bands or in music groups or just for fun. Um, yeah, learn music theory. Those are good things to prepare for a music therapy degree. But also start to get experience with clinical populations. So maybe go and volunteer with some older adults or volunteer at a preschool, volunteer at a hospital, anything where you can, so yeah, spending time with people with disabilities, where you can get, yeah, experience working with some of the people that music therapists work with that can help so that you can start to build these foundational skills of even just relating with other people who are maybe different than us. Is really important. And then also, I think if you can do it, shadowing a music therapist, calling music therapists up in your community or emailing them and asking if you can go and watch them work for a couple hours and see what they do. Those are all things that help you to prepare and get a sense if this is a field for you.
That's really cool. I think you mentioned music theory, so I'm kind of interested. How does that play into music therapy?
Yeah, so every music therapy degree involves basically being a full-time music student for your first 2 years.
Oh,
So you're taking all music theory courses, oral skills courses, music history. You're taking lessons on your primary instrument as well as guitar and potentially piano probably as well, singing. And so if you have some level of music theory before you go to school, then you don't have to take as many kind of prerequisite extra theory classes. You can just sort of dive in and take the ones that are um, part of the degree. So oftentimes people will come in and they have zero theory background, and so they have to take like an extra prereq class. So I just recommend if you take some theory beforehand, then you don't have to do that. You're ready to go. You're ready to do all the theory.
oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a shortcut, basically. Yeah.
So I think that's going to be it for today's episode, and that was all our questions.
We really like appreciate you being so passionate about what you do.
Yeah, especially since music therapy, again, it's like not a super known field. So
Right.
just having you on our podcast is very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for your wonderful questions. I really enjoyed speaking with
Mhm.
you both.
You had some amazing answers
Yeah.
as well. So it was really
Okay.
interesting to learn about.
I'm glad. I'm glad you found it interesting.
Okay.